don't put that part on the episode, David.
Put that on the bloopers.
Anyway, Lord. Okay. I'm going to say it again. Hey, welcome to the Happy Sex Talk podcast, y'all. I am here with my sister, Elsie Johnson.
What's up? What's up?
We are going to get into the shits today. We are recording our Mother's Day episode. Elsie's already mad at me for these fire round questions. So
Listen, first of all, as a precursor, before we even get fully into this episode, I just need y'all to know, like, if I blink 3 times, like, send help. Like, I'm not
send
okay.
Help immediately.
I'm not okay. I need support. Because
oh my God.
I was not supposed to have seen these, but y'all see your host out here got her questions out with highlighter, and I happened to glance over, and I was like, I'm sorry. Am I to answer those?
Am I to answer these highlighted questions?
So, listen. Send help. 3 blinks.
Also,
3 blinks.
Please know that because I have a child in daycare, he infects me weekly, and I have a cough. So this is going to happen. We're just going to have to roll with it. I have Crown and Crayon to try to smooth out the tickle in my throat.
Smooth out the rough. You know, I really feel like, you know, an ancestral remedy of alcohol kills germs.
That's how I feel.
Fruit juice
That's how I feel.
Good for something.
That's how I feel.
So,
you know,
we're in a good place.
We're in a good place.
All right.
Okay.
Back to regular scheduled program. I just wanted y'all to know the signal.
Blink 3 times.
Blink 3 times.
That's
like, I need send help.
Okay.
That's what the situation is.
Okay.
All right, continue.
Well, hopefully you ain't blinking 3
Listen,
times.
Don't worry about me. I'm talking to the audience. That's what you need to understand. I'm talking to y'all.
All right, I got you. All right, well, welcome, y'all. Today is obviously going to be phenomenal between the two of us. We are talking about a lot of things today, but I wanted Elsie to have some time to talk about who you are, what you do, where you're from, all the things. And then also, girl, I keep looking at this microphone thinking I got my lip stuff on the microphone, but it's Rihanna. I should know it ain't coming off.
Come on now with that long stay.
Anyway, also I want to say congrats on making the 40 under 40 list.
Oh,
we're going to talk about that too.
Okay, we're going to talk about it.
Elsie is a boss, y'all. So, like, this is royalty that you kind of in front of. This is Columbus, Ohio royalty right now, okay?
I'm literally drinking out of a mug with nipples.
Yes, so you are. All the nipples. Look at, just show it a little bit. Put it up a little bit closer. This is a wide variety of nipples and areolas, y'all. We just need to respect it all because everybody's nipples look different. Amen. And I got a clitoris mug because obviously that's all I care about, as you can see on my shirt.
Sheesh.
So anyway, I digress. Elsie, go ahead. Do your intro. Talk about who you are, what you do.
All right.
And all the things.
I guess I'm up. So first and foremost, once again, I just need to offer a few additional disclaimers. One being the fact that Erica literally was just, the first time Erica asked me to be on her podcast, she was literally just like, will you come over and be on my podcast? Like, the way you ask somebody, like, will you come hang out with me? Like, no preparation, no type of just like, yo, come be on my podcast. So, your host believes that I need no preparation. So, my performance will be for you to decide whether or not it would have been better with preparation. But you know what? We just going into it. So,
she'll be fine.
allow me to introduce myself. So my name is Elsie Johnson. I am mother, wife, entrepreneur, daughter, black woman, sister, person of pleasure, aiming to be more of a person of pleasure, interested in exploring that more on this podcast. Most people in Columbus, Ohio, where I live, know me best in association with my organization that I founded called Zora's House. Zora's House is a co-working space, leadership incubator that is all about the healing, creativity, leadership, and activism of women of color. Our editor is not going to be able to bleep some of these things out. So I'm just going to take some deep pauses so that our editor can come up in here and be like, let me cut here.
I mean, I'm already worried we're going to have to re-record the intro because I just left the music playing the whole time and I don't know if...
First of all, y'all better take that music because we decided upon that.
We decided upon Karen White Superwoman for y'all. It was, we decided this over Marco Polo.
Yes, we did. Video messaging app if you ain't hip.
If you ain't hip, get hip. Marco Polo is dope. Yeah, we worked real hard to decide.
We worked real hard. So anyway, enjoy that intro music, y'all.
Anyways.
We're not re-recording.
Yeah, no, we're not.
So yeah, that's me. Zora's House is a co-working space, community space, gathering space that is really created by and for women of color. And I like to say, our job is really to catalyze and encourage and support whatever dreams that Black women and other women of color have for themselves, their families, and their communities. So that's what the fuck we do.
Absolutely.
And we have a real good time.
Unapologetically.
And
yes.
we have a real good time while we're doing it.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, Zora's House is the place to be. I mean, yeah. Even in a pandemic when it's shut down, like, your virtual events are still, like, the place to be.
You heard it here first. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, so what's this experience of finding yourself on this 40 under 40 list been like? Let's talk about that for a minute.
So let's talk about this because interestingly enough, somehow this like super crusty award actually belongs on a podcast called Happy Sex Talk. Not for the reason your dirty mind is imagining, but because 40 under 40 is a relatively like prestigious kind of award here in Columbus. And, I reflected a lot the day that I got it on how I, felt uncomfortable kind of like reveling and sharing and celebrating.
Yeah.
And I think when we really get down to what is the root of pleasure and what does it mean to experience pleasure in a variety of different ways.
Absolutely.
Part of that also means honoring our desire and seeking our joy and making time and space for celebration. And I really struggle with that at times. So, it was, I made this really clear. I have my own YouTube channel, which we will definitely link to.
Oh, we will definitely link to that because that's also fire. I don't care what anybody says. I'll be watching all those episodes.
So I definitely made a whole video just kind of like reflecting on that experience and just kind of talking about how this was something that I actually, this wasn't something that was just like, oh, we just here, you came out, like I applied for this. Yeah. I freaking sought this out. Yeah. But then when I got it, I just felt so uncomfortable like sharing or celebrating myself. And so that it's just been one of those like complicated experiences like pleasure is for a lot of us.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I'm glad that you kind of made that connection because I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, but it is really hard to kind of acknowledge when you've done something that's dope. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that that's something that we can all learn from. And especially for Black women, I think it's even more complicated because there's layers to like, how we were told to kind of showcase our talents or our like, it's kind of like, I mean, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far, but like also don't be extra about it.
Right, and also get half the credit.
Yeah, so. Get half the credit and like, you get something that's great, let's move forward and keep pushing. Like, there's really no, there's no sort of stop it and celebrate and like enjoy your accolades, right? Because you've been working your ass off. Like, you deserve this and more.
No ass. Literally. Now I finally have a reason why.
Literally, the ass is gone.
Finally have a reason why.
It came back a little bit. We're all good. Right? Worked the ass off, got the award. Now it returned, and we can drop it like it's hot.
Let's go. That's it. That's the circle of life.
Twerk something. Circle of life. Absolutely. Oh, y'all. Oh, Lord.
As we, I want to pretend like I'm drinking like tea.
I mean,
I don't know, something like real civilized.
Tea probably would have been a better option for me.
First of all, it would have. We should have David warm this crown up. Can you warm this up with just a little bit of lemon?
What I should have done is made a hot toddy, but I'm not as confident in my hot toddy skills as I used to be.
Interesting. Now could be the time.
Now could be the time to relearn. Okay, so what I'm going to say is I always explain why I bring guests onto the podcast, but I feel like Elsie just explained that for me. All of these dope reasons that she just listed about the things that she's doing in the city, and all the accolades that she gets and deserves are all the reasons why she's here, but mainly she's also like my sister. And so we have these conversations about, being a mompreneur.
That's
is,
right.
The phrasing that has been like randomly put into the universe. I'm still not really sure where it started.
I semi-hate that phrase, right. Even though I was the one who like even said like, oh, we could do this mompreneur vibe. And I think it's just because you know, and now I'll get serious for a minute, but, you know, I think it's because, like, many kind of identities and things like that, and when you talk about motherhood and kind of like the public discourse, like, that's a very white term.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's like, mompreneurs, we're mompreneurs. This
Right.
is like a very, like, this is a term that is very much oftentimes applied to white women with businesses, et cetera, and it's not that I'm anti being a part of that culture, but I think, to be honest, it's like another way that I think about how womanhood and motherhood are often contextualized through like the white female experience.
Oh, absolutely.
And so,
without
you know,
question.
I think that phrase to me really kind of brings up, like, you know, but at
we
the same time,
we gotta figure out a phrase that makes us feel good about using it, but for the moment
we don't use that. But I gotta put that disclaimer out there.
But I totally agree. Yeah, because looking at black womanhood and black motherhood through the lens of whiteness is not at all what we're about. But
that is not pleasurable.
Not at all.
In case you're making a list for yourself.
In case you're making a list for yourself.
Do not put that on it.
Not pleasurable. Not at all. So, you know, let's just keep it sexy and get into these fire rounds. This fire round question. How you feeling?
All right. If you are just tuning into the podcast, if for some reason you missed the intro, we being myself and the audience, me and you, we have a little thing going on. If I blink 3 times, like, send help. I'm not okay. These questions I was really not prepared for.
Serious.
And also,
Girl.
I feel like if I had less melanin, like, my face would be lit up right now. And people who know me, who watch this, are going to find that hilarious because they know me to be somebody who's very open and very transparent. But apparently, I have the, like, public sensibilities of, like, a 1890 Victorian school marm, because
it's fine.
She was just like, vagina, and I'm like, ooh. We gonna talk about that on camera.
We gonna talk about it on camera.
So I'm ready. That's the sign. Three blinks. Three blinks.
Okay.
Send help.
All right.
Come get me.
So first question is, who's your favorite sexually liberated icon?
Ooh.
Like over time. It doesn't have to be like a current. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yes,
dead, alive, or otherwise.
Yep. Who is my favorite sexually lubricated?
Ooh, lubricated. Okay, I mean, that's fine. We could also talk about lube today, because you kind of threw that in there. Lube saves lives, FYI, but we could talk about that later.
So I haven't given this a lot of thought. And so what's coming up for me actually was a few months ago, actually about 6 months ago, when the music video WAP came out. Erica, myself, and another colleague of ours, Treva, had a conversation about that and what that meant for female, you know, especially black female sexuality.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what's coming up for me, I would not say that either of those women would be like my icon, but what I will say is that song, you know, was like really created a moment for me where I felt like, I really felt like black female bodied sexuality was being celebrated in some really special ways. So that would be my favorite iconic moment of recently.
Okay. Yeah, I can take that. Because definitely I would agree. I wouldn't say that they're like, you know, like a favorite icon, but the feeling that came from that song
was an iconic
moment for sure. And I think the conversation that the three of us had reached farther than we realized, because more people have reached out to me from watching that conversation than any other like speaking engagement that I've had in 2020.
That's right.
So put a pin in that, because maybe we need to revisit like me, you, and Treva as a dynamic for Zora's House of like talking about more things like that, because I think we created an atmosphere that made people feel safe for like talking about those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's real.
I think that's real. Something to consider too. Anyway, that's a little side note. Okay, so have you ever had sex in a dangerous place?
In a dangerous place?
And I'll let you define what dangerous means.
Right. I'm like, good Lord.
You know.
I don't think I've had sex in a dangerous place. I've had sex in many public places.
Well, I mean, that's dangerous. If you get caught, you're going to jail.
I mean, you probably get shot in today's
I mean, that's, you know.
Good Lord.
A sad but harsh reality.
Yeah. So yes, I would say I have had sex in many public places.
Okay.
And that is the end of
That is the end of that. No details needed.
No
Okay, all right.
details forthcoming.
That's cool. So who was your first love in real life or fiction? And let me pause because I've been excited to ask this question to you because I know that you read like all the books. And so I've been waiting for somebody to answer this question where their first love is like somebody that they fell in love with that isn't an actual real person.
Clearly it's Shang from Mulan. And
Yes,
why
you
would you come in and
through.
ask me? Because
I knew
that
you would
much
come through with this.
is obvious.
Okay.
But like anyone who watched Mulan and didn't fall in love with Shang, like, I mean, so I would say that, like, you know, my husband is certainly like the first love that I've really had in my life. And I say that because, in part because, like, you know, I dated a little bit in high school. I had a really traumatic experience in college that like kind of kept me off, you know, dating and sexual activity for most of college. And then I met my husband like 6 months after I graduated from college. So I was still young. And so, you know, I would say that he is my one great love. However, Shang from Mulan,
break it down for me right now. I need all the details.
Okay, so first of all, when I was watching Mulan, I was literally just like, this man is sexy. Like, he out here trying to make his way in the world.
So for those who have not watched Mulan, explain who he is and the character
so first of all, go watch it.
Well, yes.
But the whole point is that Mulan is posing as a young man to take her father's place in the army, and Shang is her commander. His dad is like reports directly to the general, or is a general who reports directly to the emperor, and so he leaves, like, you know, he leaves his son in charge of this like ragtag group of kind of like misfit officers to try to like shape them up, of which Mulan is one. And so, you know, I remember for the first time just being like, oh, like, you know, first of all, the way they drew his chest, though, that's what I'm saying. I mean, because,
and his height was a thing. His height is a thing.
It was just all of it. You know what I mean? It was just like the whole situation.
Yeah, he was smizing at me a lot.
He really did. It was like
I
just was like, you real good looking. And it's to the point where my husband, knowing that he's my true love in real life, constantly reminds me that he is voiced by Donny Osmond, and I'm like, how dare you disrespect me this way?
This is.
I don't care if it's true.
He's not wrong. But can I be honest
correct.
with you? In all the times, I mean, I didn't watch that movie a lot growing up, but I watched it enough that, like, as an adult, I should have known that Donny Osmond voiced this character. No. I didn't realize this until, like, I had a son, and he became obsessed with the movie enough that we had to put the soundtrack on his playlist. And then Donny Osmond's name came across, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Listen, Sheldon brings this up anytime I start talking about how hot he is. He's like, oh, you mean Donny?
Oh, you mean Donny?
I'm like, why do you have to be this way?
First off.
Why do you have to be this? And Batman, of course. Like, this was...
I said nothing about his voice being the element that made him sexy. Let's be very clear.
Right, I said nothing about. I said nothing about them illustrated chest paint. That's what I was. That's what that was it.
The
for me,
height.
dog.
It's all. You know what I'm saying? We didn't say nothing about the voice.
Listen.
Tell Sheldon to calm down.
Right.
Okay. Jeez, man. Okay. Okay. Here's a good one. You have a time machine.
Okay.
What moment in your sexual journey are you going back to change, re-experience, or warn yourself about?
I would probably say, so I'm gonna freaking skirt this question first of all. So y'all will quickly see that if I don't fully want to answer a question, we gonna go around that question, but I'm gonna make it real relevant.
It's a great skill that Elsie has.
So here's what I'm going to say about this. When Erica and I a couple weeks ago were doing a talk together, and you were talking about the difference between, I think it was like intimacy and sensuality. Mm-hmm. Right? And I would say that there are some moments, the difference being, Erica, do you want to describe the difference between intimacy and sexuality?
Yeah, so intimacy,
Sensuality.
Intimacy is more of like, you know, you can be intimate with anybody. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a romantic sense. Like, what we're doing right now is an intimate experience as friends, like sharing these stories and talking about, you know, some of these life experiences that we've had, just as much as like having an intimate moment with my husband can be intimate. So intimacy is more like a broad kind of like umbrella term to kind of explain any circumstance where you have a sense of closeness with somebody. Now, sensuality is more so about appreciating and understanding your body and others' bodies, so that usually requires a bit of a deeper level of connection, and that does usually involve some sort of sexual connection and experience. So just a little bit a different layer of intimacy, if you will. But yeah, a lot of times they get exchanged like as the same word, and they don't mean the same thing.
So Erica broke all that down for us, and I think thinking about my sexual experience, I kind of break it down into moments where I was intimate versus moments when I was sensual. And I think there are more moments, especially when I was younger, where I feel like I gave my intimacy and trust to people who I don't think really deserved it.
Absolutely.
And I think that those, there are moments that I think I would go back to, and I would just ask my younger self, like, are you really valuing yourself right now and what you're giving, the pieces of yourself that you're about to give, and sharing this experience. And I think there were times that I would go back and kind of I don't know, just change up some of those moments of intimacy that I gave to people who probably did not deserve that level of intimacy.
I would absolutely do the same thing. Yeah, I mean, and I think part of that is because for me, like, where I grew up in Pataskala, and, the boyfriends that I had, they were very few and far between. None of them were really that serious, except for one that I dated that also happened to be black. And so we connected on on another level, but I was biracial and considered in some ways like this exotic person, because I grew up around a bunch of white, like, corn-fed people. Like, hey, Pataskala people who are listening, but I'm right. We drove tractors to school like one day a year. Like, it's a whole thing.
Okay.
Like, right? So, I didn't really get into a world where like people I was dating actually appreciated me for who I was, versus being like this fulfillment
the idea of you,
the idea of me, right? So I didn't really experience that until I got to college. And then I didn't know what to do with that attention. And so I was just out here thotting and bopping, catching up for lost time.
Ain't nothing wrong with that, first of all.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Definitely still being safe, but thotting and bopping in a way that, like, I wish that, our society doesn't really talk to anyone about, like, making sure that things as simple as, like, spending time with someone, like, is essential as like a foundation part of building a relationship, right? Platonic or otherwise.
That's right.
And that you have to be really careful about who you give your time to.
Correct.
Right? Like, I feel like I didn't learn that lesson until I was well into my 20s. Maybe.
Yeah, I
think maybe close to my 30s.
I mean, that intimacy piece, and that's why I said when you brought that up at that podcast, it stood out to me, because I do think that it's something that we often, even when we can look at those two things as separate, we almost always feel like, or talk about as if they have to be together. Like, if you're intimate, you're sexual. If you're sexual, you're intimate. As if those two things aren't two separate things.
Right.
So
they are not mutually exclusive.
I definitely think I would go back and think about some of those intimate moments and really kind of like talk to myself about where my motivation was, where my head was at when I was having that level of intimacy with folks.
Absolutely. And I think too, my perspective of my sexuality was that I existed for everybody else's pleasure,
of course,
and enjoyment. It wasn't, my sexuality and my body didn't actually exist for me to enjoy or to appreciate or to whatever, right? And so I've always had body issues. I mean, I've been doing this work for 15 years. And I'm still, like, literally had a moment today. Like, it's a thing. I will have body image issues and, like, concerns around that probably for the rest of my life, right? It's just how it is. Doesn't matter how long you in a field where, like, I'm surrounded by body-affirming people on a regular basis, but it doesn't change the fact that, like, I still grew up in a society that doesn't
and move through move through today a society
absolutely
that is still in that space.
So I think that if I were to go back, I would kind of warn myself about, like, the fact that my body exists for me, and that I don't have to do certain things to gain attention from people who didn't really want to give it to me in the first place.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So I found myself in situations with people, like, where I'm, like, in long-term, like, not the best sort of relationships with people because they're getting something from me, but I haven't gotten shit from them.
That's right. And
but I'm over here thinking, like, oh my gosh, we're really, like, this is it. It's just me and that. Like, no.
Nope.
That was never the case.
Nope.
Right? And so then, of course, you know, I meet David when I'm 20 and a sophomore in Miami. And I'm like, who is this dude who, like, actually wants to get to know who I am? Whoa. And, like, whoa. Like, is genuinely this nice to everybody. You know, so it's like, then you meet somebody who is giving you that space, right? And you don't know how to react. And I'm just kind of like, oh, man, like, I wish that society would kind of let us know that, like, that's okay,
normal,
right?
This is what it's supposed to be.
You know, right. So like I had conversations with my dad, of course, who like, you know, tried to tell me like the type of person that I deserved to be with, sort of thing. But like when you're talking to your dad about it, it's like, okay, dad, like you're saying this because you're my dad, right? Like
which hopefully they would be,
but like you just don't really take it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like when your parents give you advice, you're like, yeah. So anyway, there are a lot of things that I would go back and, you know, kind of talk about, but I'm with you on the, like, getting people to understand that, like, who you spend your time with on an intimate level.
And your emotional energy, I think.
Yeah, emotional energy is everything.
You know, we've been having more of a conversation about that, especially in, I think, more of a vocal and visible conversation, especially in 2020, as more Black folks have said, I'm not going to do this emotional labor. I think emotional labor is a concept that's really come to the forefront. And if you're not familiar, I definitely would encourage you to look that up a little bit more. But it just speaks to the work of putting into emotion, like the work and emotions that go into certain conversations, certain activities. And oftentimes right now it's being used in this context of like the emotional labor of explaining Blackness to non-Black people, especially as it relates to racial and social justice. However, I think that like emotional labor is a huge part of relationships. So like when I think about intimacy, I think about emotional labor and where we are spending that emotional labor on, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. That's great. That could be a whole damn podcast episode in itself.
Y'all welcome.
Noted. Y'all welcome.
You welcome, subscribers.
You welcome. Okay, so this is my favorite question to ask.
Watch my eyes. Watch my eyes.
What's your strongest sexual asset?
All right, I ain't gonna blink, y'all.
Break it down. Break it down.
What is my strongest sexual asset? I would say that I really like to please my partner. Like I really get off on, you know, the person that I'm with like feeling pleasure. Like that turns me on a lot. And
absolutely.
So I think because of that, like I tend to be like a very giving partner and, you know, very active. And I'm not gonna say much more because I don't know who about to be watching this. So who about to, because you know my mama be watching everything that I post.
Okay, well, hey mama. Oh my God. You grown and married, she understands.
Good Lord.
You got 2 whole ass kids, okay?
I don't know how. Listen, immaculate conception. What you talking about? What you talking about?
Gosh, that's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, no, that's a good asset to have.
Listen, I enjoy
that is, you know,
making sure you're enjoying.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize that you get a lot of pleasure from being the person who gives pleasure. Like people don't make the connection.
That's true.
Because it's not a normal thing that you would think about, right? You think like, no, the receiving end of that would give me more pleasure than the giving part of it, but that's not always the case for people.
I enjoy the giving, I think.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Okay, so we're gonna get into the sexy topics now.
Good Lord, those are the sexy topics?
No, those are my fire round questions.
I talked about shag. I done talked about freaking
Those are just the warm up questions.
All right. Woo!
I think you got it though.
I'm glad I put my big girl panties on for this one. This is a lot. Listen, all right, we ready.
We over here with lip color on. We adults.
We got full lip color. What y'all? That long last. Long last.
Man,
we ready.
Okay, so I want to talk about Zora's house for a minute before we get into like the super sexy topics. I'm gonna ease into.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I mean,
lubrication. Because you know, lube is important.
It's necessary.
Yeah, I ain't just gonna jump all in with no lube and make it all uncomfortable.
Right. Thank you.
Anyway, so I want to know, what's it like for your brainchild to like? What is it like to know that your brainchild is bringing so much like joy, pleasure, and community for women of color all over the country at this point? Because now that the pandemic has happened, there's like pros and cons to this, right? Is that Zora's house is not open until the end of this month, right?
That's right, yeah.
They're opening again at the end of this month, but you've been closed for quite some time, and so that allowed you to make memberships now be virtual as well. which opened up to a whole new slew of members that you didn't have access to before, because a lot of the events were in person. So now we can say all over the country, which is huge, right?
Very exciting. Really, you know, it's one of those things, to your point about, first of all, you know, I think one of the things that's so powerful about the resistance that Black folks and resilience that have always been a part of the Black tradition is this idea of like finding joy and opportunity. And so, yes, we have an entire pandemic, which has been shit. And we still up in this panorama, and who knows, like, when things are going to even get back to a semblance of the norm that we understand. Right. However, being able to find opportunities, and I think for me, definitely being able to extend Zora's house and, our community in a virtual sense and reach more people all over the country. I think a lot about our Black Feminist Night School.
Ooh, that's happening tonight at 9.
Happening tonight. So y'all are definitely not going to be watching
you're not going to be watching
at a time, but the day that we are recording, it is happening tonight at 9.
This is true.
And what I love about that is that we just get folks from all over the country. Like, when we always check in, people like, I'm calling from San Diego, I'm calling from DC, I'm from Philly, I'm here.
It's so dope.
And just like having that conversation. So I would say that for me, bringing pleasure and joy and community through Zora's house means that I try to hold myself to a standard where I'm making sure that I am living those values in my own life. And so, it's very easy as the founder and entrepreneur, head hustler to constantly, just be on the grind to like be figuring out, okay, where's the next funding coming from? I got to write this grant. We got this thing happening. And just really be head down, focused on, the getting in the weeds of like getting the work done. And I think knowing that we bring so much joy often, makes me take a step back and say, you know what? Are you getting joy right now? Are you getting pleasure right now? Are you feeling like you are really in community right now? And so those are the things that have just been, I think that is how that's really impacted my life, because otherwise I'd be just out here workaholic. I mean, I'm still a workaholic, like 100%. So I think just the fact that I
both
have
that in common,
correct, to like kind of balance me, it's like a reminder to really seek that in my own life as well, which I really appreciate.
I mean, I think it's really interesting because I've been in this work for 16 years, and I think when I first got into it, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do or like how I wanted to, because Happy Sex Talk started off as a Tumblr blog when I was in grad school, just answering anonymous questions. It was just like this online persona that like I was like, okay, this is gonna be my fun to get me out of the academic world of sex ed and just do like something fun for myself, because it's something I could manage, right? And it's not like the blog took off, so I didn't have a bunch of questions to answer all the time. It was something that was manageable. And then it didn't hit me that like I wanted it to actually be an LLC until I moved back here to Columbus. But the fact that like sex and pleasure and intimacy and relationships and like talking about all of those things is my job is also like this reminder of like, don't forget that those things exist in your life. And I, in full disclosure, I am not the best at remembering that I am also a human being who like has
a whole human
who has a whole ass partner.
I've met him. He's real.
He is. And like, I have to get those reminders for myself sometimes that like, yes, this is my profession, but it's also like a part of my livelihood as a human being, right? To 100%. Have these experiences for myself. So, it's just kind of, it's something that I definitely have to balance, because it's hard when you think about sex and everything you do that's related to sex and sexuality is your profession. It's really hard to then turn the switch to be like, okay, well now I'm this sexual being, because I'm like still in academic mode sometimes. So like there has to be a little bit of a transition period for me,
of course,
between those two spaces. But I definitely understand what you're saying. It definitely holds you kind of accountable to the things that you need in your life.
Exactly. You're espousing those values, being like, I need to make sure I'm being true to these things too.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the word that we don't like to talk about: mompreneurs. So
that's all right. We already did our disclaimer.
This is true. So you and I talk about this often, right? About the struggles that we experience being mompreneurs in this crazy, like, uncertain time of COVID, and then also just outside of COVID, right? So how are you managing everything? Like, have you found
LOL.
Yeah, right.
Blink 3 times. I need help.
3 times, yeah. Have you found any like helpful techniques or tools that like, the listeners could use for their own lives to kind of help them through these tough times of managing things?
Yeah, so first and foremost, just to give y'all a little bit of context around my story, I think that makes the mompreneur angle even more real. So Zora's house is a physical space that my husband and I built from the ground up. And by built from the ground up, I mean we clearly hired people to build it because we don't know how to build a house. But like, we bought a vacant
Although
lot.
I wouldn't be surprised if you did.
First of all, that's why I gotta be this.
If these were skill sets that y'all had, I would
gotta
not
have
be
this whole disclaimer because he would be like, "Wow, and carpentry." I'm like, "Yeah, not."
Yeah.
So just to be clear, we purchased a vacant lot. And, we had Zora's house built on that space. And, the day that we broke ground on Zora's house was the day I gave birth to my son. So it was literally happening in the same day. Felt like both things were like coming into the world at the same time in some ways. And so, this idea of like mompreneurship, this idea of like my motherhood and my entrepreneurial journey being so intertwined with one another is real for me on so many levels, and it has been. It always has been. And I think similar to that, since that time, Zora's house opened in 2018. We actually live on the same lot as Zora's house, and so truly, like, Zora's house has grown up with my kids. Like, when I gave birth to Kara, working through being able to delegate and bring people in enough to be able to take a maternity leave was a huge challenge for me. And I remember, almost in October, I remember having a conversation with a friend and almost being like, should I just shut it down? Like, I'm just gonna shut it down. Like, I literally was going to shut everything down for 6 months just because I was so uncomfortable bringing other people in and asking for help. I was like, I'd rather shut this entire shit down for half a year than like ask for help. And I think having to work with a few mentors, a business coach, some other folks to help me really think through like what was happening there and like what I was so afraid of. Being afraid of feeling like I was gonna disappoint people, being afraid of being let down. And so anyway, I say all that to say that like, so many elements of my entrepreneurial journey have really been parallel with moments that have been important to me as a mom. And so as for your question about how if and how I figured it out, LOL, I haven't. So
I mean, I didn't expect you to say you figured it out, but I mean, there has to be some things that like on a day-to-day basis you can use to kind of help yourself
I must say, because
be okay.
That's a friendship ender. If I came in here and I was like, actually I haven't told you yet, like I figured all this shit out.
I figured it all out. I'd be like,
weeks
we
ago
cannot be friends.
So right, be like, first of all,
friendship over immediately.
Over podcast ended. So I think that for me, some things that are really important is definitely having a really amazing partner and working on our communication. And I think being very clear about my needs as a mom and as an entrepreneur, those are things that I have struggled with. And I think, one has really encouraged me, like they both encouraged me to like push myself on my communication with my husband, and talking to him about what I need, understanding his needs as well and how that interacts with the things that I need.
Absolutely.
So communication is a big piece. And then to be honest, just like, transparency is another really big one. So, I have kind of given up this pretense that like I have everything together, which is why so many people who know me, when I'm like blushing about sex questions, would probably be surprised because I'm so transparent in a lot of areas of my life. Like I'm always just like, this is what's happening. If something is, even when we are experiencing like a technical issue at Zora's house, I will literally just email people and be like, this is a mess, but like, this is what's going on.
This is what's happening.
And so I think really allowing other people to like see the fullness of the journey and say like, hey, like you just saw that 40 under 40 announcement, and last week I just posted a picture of my living room, which is piled high with like 5 feet worth of laundry.
My God, the laundry, it never ends.
The never ending laundry, right?
It's never done.
And so like these are things I think like that level of transparency, and I actually think that like those are actually 2 posts that I made on social media, and I think think they got the same level of engagement.
Yeah.
Because allowing people to see that. And then my last thing would just be like, listen, some of these fucking balls are gonna drop.
Yes.
And you're gonna drop some balls,
Man.
and it's really not about trying to like keep them all in the air. It's just trying to be intentional about what drops and when.
Yeah.
And I think that for me has been the biggest thing of being like, you know what? The dishes need to be cleaned. Like, Sheldon and I haven't had sex in weeks.
Yeah.
Like, I also need to write this proposal.
Yeah.
This kid has, like, been wetting the bed.
Right.
So, like, which of these things, I cannot address
all of
these things.
Yeah.
Not, like, logistically, not emotionally.
Right.
Which one or two of these things can I address right now? Which of these things is just going to be, is not going to get addressed right now?
Yeah.
And so I think just knowing that you're going to drop some balls and then being like, that's it. Like, you make that, you be intentional about it, you communicate it to the people that are impacted, and just be like, this is the capacity I have right now. Here's what I'm gonna address, like, today and tomorrow. And like, go from there. You know. And I think just like creating that culture, even in my household, of being like, what, like, not even asking the question like, how are we gonna get it all done? It's just like, what balls are we gonna drop?
Absolutely.
Like, let's make this decision together.
Let's just make this decision together. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think that's honestly how David and I have probably survived quarantine too, is like, you know, having, because with us, our Emery just started going back to daycare, so
listen, these superheroes out here
had 2 kids under 5 here 24/7 every day, and we're both like, you know, working and trying to manage things. And I think if we didn't have that honest, open communication about our capacity and like what we have the ability to manage on a day-to-day basis, we probably wouldn't have survived this you know, pandemic, because I think it's really crucial to kind of have those you know, those conversations, because the concept of balance is a joke. It's not a real thing. I mean, that's the one thing that I've learned, and in starting Happy Sex Talk back up post like my extended maternity leave with Dia, is like, balance is a joke. And it's a matter of understanding that at certain points, other things are going to take priority over others. And as long as you can be as consistent as you possibly can, like,
that's it. You know, to me, it's less about balance, more about intentionality.
Yeah,
and
right.
being
Absolutely.
thoughtful about the choices that you're making, and then of course, you know, communicating that to the people who will be affected. Right. I think sometimes we feel so guilty because we're like, oh, I can't address this right now. And like, I know, at least for me, like, my coping mechanism oftentimes, if I feel like I'm letting somebody down, is just to be like, let me just like not talk to this person right now, because I don't want them to like call me out on the fact that I'm being a shitty friend or a shitty wife or a shitty, you know, daughter or sister or whatever. And so I'm just kind of like, let me just try to be invisible instead of, you know, I've been really working on being like, honestly, I don't have the capacity for this right now. Like, I recently had to tell a friend of mine, we talk on a really regular basis, and I had to tell her, I was like, hey, just FYI, I have a lot going on the next couple weeks. I've been feeling a little bit of stress. So if there's something that you specifically need from me, like, reach out and let me know. But I was like, I'm not going to be the like observant friend to like recognize something is going wrong. And I was like, nothing was going wrong, but I was like, just FYI, like, for the next like 4 to 6 weeks, like, don't drop hints. Like, if you need something, tell me. I'm gonna be more self-involved than I usually am. And I just, instead of being like, damn it, like, I'm out here, I can't even like focus on my friends, I just tell them. And I think like that alleviates that burden of feeling like you have to
and
be
I think
perfect.
You know, being that self-aware takes work, and being able to admit to yourself that you can't be everything for everybody takes work, you know. And I think that it's definitely a skill set that people should learn, because I do think that it does, like you said, alleviate some of that like anxiety about not being able to be there for the people that you care about, because sometimes things just take over and there's not anything you can do about it. And it's not that you don't love those people, it's just that more of your time has to be given to certain 100%. Things at certain times, you know. But one of the things that you and I have started doing is planning together.
So first of all, another behind the scenes of this podcast is literally, as we were going over this, we're like, so are we about to incorporate this conversation about planning? Absolutely, yes, we are.
Absolutely.
What will the segue be? No clue. We could literally be
we're
like,
just gonna do
so
it.
Anyway, that's that about the clitoris. So we've been planning together, and just like the moment has arrived, friends.
The moment has arrived, friends. It's time to talk about planning, just for a short little bit. So we are decorative planners.
We are. And I have my planner and I don't even have it. I didn't even bring it in here.
Yeah,
with me, so we're gonna have to.
Yeah, mine is kind of far away too.
We'll have to like show it to you at some other time. But
we love stickers.
That's right.
And color coding and
all
organization.
all the organization. And
all
what's hilarious is I think a lot of people look at there and they're like, oh my gosh, like you're so organized, or like, how do you get all this done? And I was like, I honestly feel like sometimes it's the illusion of it's giving into like the feeling that we are in control of stuff that we really are not in control of.
Yes.
That really feels good. And at least for me, I've always been like a list maker. Like,
yeah, me too.
You know,
me
when
too.
It comes to,
I live and die by a list.
Oh my gosh,
Trust.
like list. Yeah. I'm gonna write this down. Like to-do list. I mean, just I have always, that has always been such a huge important part of like how I navigate kind of like my time and what I'm focused on at any given time. And so my sister was the one who first introduced me to decorative planner, and some of y'all are gonna be like, what does this even mean? I'm just gonna drop some hashtags on the video or down below. You'll be able to see.
It's a whole world. We don't have time to explain it to you right now, but just, you know.
And it's really not that relevant to this topic.
It's not.
However, I will say this.
It gives us calming. It gives us calm and pleasure, and this is our like non-mom, non-work, like just us thing.
Yes. So that was the thing that I was going to say, that like we have had, you know, this idea of kind of like planning. My sister first introduced me to it, and I think decorating, it sounds crazy, like decorating my calendar and my list and all of those things, you know, adding like some flair or some quotes or whatever. Yeah. For me, it allows me a moment to like take stock and breathe. And I just love it. And like you said, it's not a mom thing. Yeah. It's not a business thing. Right. Like it is literally probably the one hobby that and reading. Those are like the two hobbies that I have right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's essential to have something that is not related to like a role that you have to fill.
Yes, that's a perfect way to say that.
Right?
Yep,
and so
exactly.
It's something that we're doing like just for ourselves. We have a scheduled time every Friday.
That's
we block out 2 hours. We may do it virtually or do it in person, but either way, we do what we can.
Planners and stickers out, and
we do what we can to make it work. And it's definitely something that I look forward to at the end of every week, because it's kind of like, okay, I can kind of breathe for a minute. I can take stock, and I can either get my planner caught up for the week that we just had, so that I don't forget what happened,
which I need to do on a regular basis.
Usually, or we can prep for next week, or prep for the month, or like whatever we have coming up. So that's definitely been something for me. So the recommendation that I have is to find something that takes you outside of the roles that you have to fulfill, whatever that is for you, some type of hobby that gives you a sense of like calm.
That's right. And pleasure. Like,
and it pleasure, definitely, of course,
it gives us so much joy to I think just to do that, and it's one of those things, and I'm very grateful for this hobby, because to be completely honest, prior to January of this year, I've always had a full-time job in addition to Zora's house, which essentially meant 2 full-time jobs and kids and everything else. And for probably the last 4 or 5 years, like there has been nothing really outside of work and family and sometimes and village, right? Like I'll go to the community events and this and that, but like that's it, you know, like work, family, village, that's all.
That's it.
So just to like have now like something that brings me joy that's not related to a role, I think that's a really great way to put that.
Yeah, definitely. So we're gonna switch gears here a little bit.
Glad I'm getting to the bottom of this cup.
And we gonna get into the sexy side of momming.
Hey.
The sexy side of momming. Hey.
Okay.
So just do a little chair twerk.
Right. Y'all missed that because y'all don't get below the table.
Do a little chair twerk real quick. All right, so but I'm laughing because these questions are kind of deep, but you already know they come in.
That's all right. We know. We already talk about it.
So before you were a mom, what was your understanding of pleasure? And has your sense of pleasure changed or adjusted since you've become a mom, and in what ways?
So this is an interesting question, and I got a little bit emotional as Erica and I were kind of like prepping for this podcast, because for me, this really brings up, you know, I mentioned earlier that I had experienced a traumatic event in college, and I experienced a pretty traumatic sexual assault when I was a freshman in college that had lasting health ramifications for me, and it was something that I think really shifted my understanding of myself and my agency and my understanding of sex and pleasure. And the reason that I contextualize and share that is because in a lot of ways I think about like the person that I was before and after. Like I often think of my sexuality as like a before and after.
Gotcha.
And I think that like when I met my husband, he was the first person, this was years later, I think about almost 5 years later, the first time he and I had sex. And you know, he was the very first person that I had felt that level of sensuality and intimacy with, that I was able to feel comfortable with on a sexual level.
Yeah.
And so I say that because in a lot of ways, like, you know, my marriage is really, in the relationships that, you know, that I have with my husband, is something that has been, I think it's been it is a safe place in my life, and it always has been. And so I think that frames to me, like, you know, about my sexuality as a mother. I can't take that out of the context of like the larger context of my marriage, my partnership and my friendship with my husband, which is kind of like my safe place in a lot of ways. So I think for me, and I had some nerves around what it was going to be like post baby. I think because it took so much for me to feel safe in the situation that I was in. So then to like add this other element and be like, boom, now you about to be a mom, and like you're gonna have to navigate this, and that was really scary to me, because I think there was still so much trauma that I hadn't even processed at that time, that I was kind of feeling like, how are we gonna handle this? So, you know, I think that on the physical level, like, that shit changes after you have children. Like, you kind of know that, but I feel like
you don't actually know it until that shit happens.
It's like, oh my,
like
there are like, you know, scars and soreness in places that didn't used to exist, and even just kind of like relearning that. And then I think that, you know, there. And so I think that like that was like relearning my body, like relearning myself, was a huge part of just kind of like getting back comfort into, you know, who I am as a sexual person, as a mom. And I actually think it has less to do with my identity as a mom. Because to be honest, I was just like, what? Moms be fucking too? How you think they got these kids? Like, you know, like I never had that, like,
I mean, true.
I literally never had that kind of like respectability, like, oh, you're a mom, of course, blah, blah, you know, like, or just feeling like, oh, now that I'm a mom, like these things are going to change. It was more so for me, like having established a sense of safety in the circumstance that we were in, that was very specific, and then adding a new circumstance and having to reestablish that sense of safety, which for me also came with being able to be very clear and communicative about my needs, my comfort level, and all of a sudden we were having to have a whole other round of conversations. So it was like having to like get back into that that headspace.
No, absolutely. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I definitely didn't have the understanding of like, you know, as a mom I shouldn't be having sex. It's more so like my my like desire, my energy level, my like mental capacity for being like present, you know, and I don't know why, but like my to-do list got longer.
Oh, something to do with having kids, maybe a little bit.
I guess I shouldn't say I don't know why, but yes, I mean, I know why, but like my to-do list got longer, so then it's like, you know how when you go to lay your head down at night, you're thinking about your list for the night, and so like that time frame took longer than it did before. And that like dipped into my time of like where I'm normally trying to get out of that mode to get into the mode of being a partner, a sensual being, you know. So it's like navigating all of that was interesting for me, and I think that I just noticed changes in mainly like my desire and my level of like just arousal and wanting pleasure in general, because breastfeeding also plays a part in
just about to say, so this was the other piece of it as well. So like the communicating of my kind of like the communication, the like how the communication of my like shifting desires, all of that like 100% played a role. And to your point, those desires were shifting. Like, you know, I was exhausted. I was oftentimes feeling, we out here just like, don't worry about it. This mic check. We gonna get it. But you know, my kind of like, everything that you just said, like feeling tired, being able to feel present, learning my body, the postpartum body. I gained weight
Absolutely.
after,
Yeah.
so there was a lot of things there that was really important, and that feeling of being touched out. Like, I also have breastfed.
Yep.
And just for me, honestly, it wasn't even so much the physical being touched out, but it was the idea of like constantly being needed by somebody else. And it's like, I don't want anybody to need me for anything. Like, I don't want my kids to need me for anything. I don't want my husband to need me for anything. I don't want my parents to need me for anything. I don't want my friends to need me for anything. Like, it was the constant feeling of like I'm always on call for other people in some way, shape, or form, that I think once I had kids, and it felt like, damn, this never turns off. Like, we're literally always on call. Like, that feeling was very overwhelming to me, and I think it really kind of like lessened my desire for sex, because I really felt like I don't want to be at the center of anybody's like need right now. Like, even something that I would feel pleasurable before, I was just like, I just want to be over here in the corner by myself. Like, leave me alone.
In my own little corner.
That's it. That's Cinderella. My own little corner, my own little chair. That's all I want.
My own little chair. So, this next question we kind of already answered, so I'm gonna skip it. We're gonna move to the next one, because we already talked about bodies. So
yeah, we did.
So we talked about this before, but how, like, so I can answer this first if you want me to. But how do your feelings about your body post pregnancies impact your ability to kind of feel sexy or even see yourself as a sexual being? And then I'm more interested in how that's impacted an intimate relationship with yourself. We've talked about how it's impacted our marriages and like our relationship with our partners, but I'm thinking more so like, it took me a minute to even find the desire to want to be intimate with me again, right? Like, and I don't know, with Emery, I had all that extra water, and so my skin on my stomach has literally stretched out. And then I had a C-section, an emergency C-section after 36 hours of labor with him, and then also had a scheduled C-section with Dia. So none of my organs are back in the places where they were before.
They just
literally
around.
Everything about my body is different. Everything has shifted. The way I'm like carrying my weight is different. The way that my body moves is different. And so it's just kind of figuring out like how to navigate that, like even the way that I used to be able to pleasure myself has changed because my body is different and things aren't the same. So like, just kind of, what has that experience been like for you? What's that journey been like for you?
I think it's interesting because the first place that I go is really thinking about the way so I'm gonna bring you through my train of thought, because a lot of things just kind of like happened in my head. So I thought about the fact that like, damn, my body is different, and because my body is different and I don't really love the way my body looks, I've ended up over the last couple years like dressing in clothes that I don't really love.
Absolutely.
And like don't feel I don't feel fly in. Everything feels very functional. And because I'm dressing like that, I don't really do my makeup anymore the way I used to. And because I don't get dressed and I walk around in my pajamas with no makeup on all the time, like I don't feel sexy. I don't feel like beautiful a lot of the time. And I think that I focus on other things. I'm just like, listen, I don't gotta be beautiful to get this website done.
This is true.
I think it's easier at times for me to just like really get into the areas where I feel like I'm really kicking ass or where I'm really succeeding. Like, well, let me go work. Let me go build Zora's house. Let me go, do this speaking engagement and get that positive affirmation for the ways that I'm showing up. That allow me to kind of like distance myself for the way that I feel in my body when it comes to being a sexual and sensual being. So the long answer, the shorter answer is that like there's to me like been kind of like this steady like decline and disengagement of myself as like a sexual and a sexy feeling attractive feeling person, that I think also comes from not feeling strong in my body and haven't been working out the way I never loved working out, but just a lot of different things that I think I kind of like have struggled with, and I'm just now getting back into a place where I can consider those in real ways. So one of the things I want to encourage y'all, for those of you who are listening, is to recognize the same way I talked about earlier that like sometimes a ball is going to get dropped. I also believe that like you can't be working on every aspect of your life at all times. Right? Like, and so for me,
absolutely not.
This has been probably one of the lowest priorities. I'm just like, but you fine. Like, we'll be fine. I'll figure it out at some point. And, you know, I've really allowed myself to kind of like lean into some of the other things that are going on in my life, even just like exploring my motherhood and like really leaning into my business, growing Zora's house. I am only just now, and literally like in this year, I've really started to like have these thoughts and questions with myself and process some of this with my therapist, and all of that. So, you know, to be continued.
Yeah,
I'm a to be continued like everybody else. But that's one of those questions that has come up for me now that I am making space to really address in ways that I haven't, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, there's been slow changes for me too. Like, Dia's almost 2 years old now, and which is like, I don't understand how time works. What? Anyways, we won't get emotional about that today. And so, you know, I'm at like kind of this point now where like, first off, I need to be able to chase my children, because Dia has a kindred attraction to running into a street, like at any given moment. And so my, like, you know, I've noticed that like I can't get out the blocks like I used to,
girl,
for a multitude of reasons, but I definitely can't get out the blocks. And I'll be damned if my child gets into the street because I can't chase her. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so it's kind of those sorts of things. I mean, granted, how often are we playing by a street? Like, that's not very often, but you know how I process. I go worst case scenario so that I'm pleasantly surprised when shit don't end up that way. So I'm like, in the off chance that we playing by a street,
die because my window.
Yeah, right. Like, no, because I'm over here out of breath, hyperventilating, trying to chase you. So, you know, I mean, it's just kind of like those sorts of things, like with the world opening back up and it's starting to be nice outside, and like us wanting to take the kids outside and like, you know, do all those sorts of things. Like, it's giving me, you know, the vibes of like I can start prioritizing like moving more, you know. And I think I'm just trying to keep it simple, like move more. That's really just where it's at.
I literally wrote in my planner.
See?
But I literally wrote in my planner that like I wanted to take just one walking meeting a week. That's it. That's just to start. Like, I have a lot of meetings during the day. Some of my meetings, I'm at the point now where I'm used to them being on Zoom or whatever. But sometimes what I'll do, if I don't have to share a screen or look at a screen, I'll be like, hey, can we talk on the phone? And then I'll just like get on the phone and just walk around the block for like that whole hour. Just like, I'm not running, I'm not jogging. I'm literally just like walking my neighborhood for like an hour as I'm like having this meeting. And so it's like, it really is the small things. And I think for me, it goes back to, and this is probably like a really good way to start, you know, honestly, to leave this interview, but I think it goes back to viewing myself as worthy. And viewing myself as worth the time and energy and investment for pleasure. And thinking of myself as, you know, beautiful and sexy and deserving. And those are all things that I know are going to come from me. And so that's where I've really been kind of working over the last couple months. No,
I think that's a great way to end the interview for sure, because it's a journey to find those points where like you can start appreciating yourself on those levels. But I think that acknowledging that that's going to be an ongoing journey, really, no matter the stage in your life, whether you're a mom or just a human being in general. I mean, we're talking about momming because that's our life, and this is supposed to be the Mother's Day episode and like all those sorts of things. However, a lot of what we're saying is relevant for people who 100%. Are not, you know, moms at the time. And so I think, just understanding that you are worthy of these things, right? You're worthy of pleasure, you're worthy of joy, and aside from all the other roles that you play, they will be enhanced when you can have the best relationship with yourself first, right? So like nurturing you will inevitably make you show up in a better way for all the other people in your life who need you for shit and who rely on you for things. So as often as we can remember,
dropping this wisdom as always. I hope y'all wrote that down. You can't pour from an empty cup.
This is true,
and you can't pour from an empty clit.
Yeah.
So
well,
don't
amen.
Even try.
Hey, and while we over here talking about clits, hold on. Look, I got my new team members who joined the party here. I'm still looking I'm still looking for names for them. So you know, if you have some, put them in the comments. This is the new tag team here. This is the original Juicy. You know, I liked her. She was just a little small, so I wanted to get them printed bigger. So I did a little custom order. But anyway, so now we got 3. We out here winning.
We winning.
We out here winning. This is airing in May, which I would like to state is also National Masturbation Month. So there will be plenty of content coming in the month of May from Happy Sex Talk to encourage and support you in those
efforts to celebrate and to commemorate this holiday,
to commemorate the month-long holiday that should really just be year-long. I mean, it's fine, but there is a month specifically dedicated to the enjoyment of pleasure through masturbation. So I think I feel good about this. You feel like all hearts and minds are clear?
I feel like we're in a good place. I did not have to blink 3 times. I
Hey,
appreciate those of y'all who were looking out just on the ready to send support if it hadn't been necessary, but appreciate y'all listening and enjoying this, and hopefully it blessed some of y'all in some way. I don't know how, but hopefully it did.
So we said that the version of Superwoman that we gonna end on is Lil Mo.
Lil Mo, man.
So let's
bless you one more time on the way out.
Bless you one more time on the way out with this. Because Fab, come on the verse.
That shit is so a particular time.
So a particular time. Oh, yeah.
Like, is this?
Oh
like,
my
is this
God.
the song?
That's so funny. Hey.
Baby come faster than a speeding bullet.
Man.
My goodness.
Fabulous.
What can even be said?
Fabulous.
Baby, I know we ain't there yet, y'all.
I know we ain't there yet. That's not the point. Don't be judging.
I was just excited.
Man, listen. Me and Elsie be having fun. Thank you for coming today, boo.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you.
Freaking, this video is not sponsored by Crown, but
it's not sponsored by Crown.
If you know,
but I have a feeling by the end of this podcast, Crown is going to be a sponsor because this is all I drink. So that's just how that's going to go.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll see you next week. Bye.